Okay, so I've got the SYNTRX II by ERICA Synths right here. Let's get to it. The SYNTRX II has also got a pretty simple but relatively useful sequencer built in just to be able to do some sketches and brainstorming as well. But the real reason why the SYNTRX II is so interesting is, of course, the patch matrix, right? The patch matrix, as explained by ERICA Synths, is a digitally controlled analog patch matrix. It's a mixer buffered multiple matrix. So when designing patches, you can mix up to 16 inputs into a single output without losing any signal strength. And likewise, you can send one signal up to 16 outputs simultaneously. This patch matrix, like ERICA physical cable patching, is a classic EMS vintage synthesis workflow concept that's been around for many years. But like ERICA patching, this workflow of generating sounds can be a bit daunting and tad frustrating if you're unfamiliar with patching synths in general. But nevertheless, at least on paper, it might be super worthwhile because the workflow itself has such interesting potential for generating unexpected ideas. So ERICA modules and hardware standalone boxes like the SYNTRX II here might be able to jumpstart that same oldness or that creative exhaustion to mix things up a bit and to allow you to cook with some new ingredients, new methods. And don't get me wrong here, you don't need a box like this per se. In fact, before all this, I just had an old spare MacBook. I loaded it up with my Arteria Soft Synth collection and with a small cheap MIDI controller. I absolutely had a blast away from my main rig. So it's more about the change of scene, as I've mentioned this before in my other videos. But sometimes if you got the budget, it might be worthwhile kind of going all out of your comfort zone into something a little more exotic. And for me in this case, the SYNTRX with its patch matrix. It can definitely be frustrating at first because you got to go slow because you're learning something new. At least in the beginning, you really can't expect immediate results. It'll take some time commitment. But obviously this is like a delicate balancing act because you certainly don't want to force it and waste too much time, but you still got to give it a solid go. ERICA modules, external synths, they're constantly facing scrutiny from the all-seeing eye of, resale value. Because if I see it and if it's not being used, I want to get rid of it. Now, if we only did this with software plugins, I bet we'd never buy another software plugin again. I mean, if there was like a physical manifestation of each plugin that we actually own and just realize how many we actually own but never use. And just as a small consolation for us hardware geeks, I think hardware will always be useful somewhere, in my opinion. Software is useful too, but it's volatile. You don't know when the next computer update is gonna break it, or they stop supporting it and you got to authenticate it or whatever. Okay, so let's actually talk about matrix patching. Matrix patching is almost like somewhere in between ERICA patching with real cables and just the regular desktop synthesizer. It offers this open-ended, choose your own synth adventure type of versatility of a ERICA patching, but you still get a pretty good value proposition because you get all of these modules in one box. In fact, if you had to purchase all these modules separately, I think it would be more expensive than if you were to just purchase this standalone unit. And you don't have to deal with patch cables and having to build it and take it down again because you get recallability with a patch matrix, which is a big creative plus. Well, mostly with the SYNTRX II, you can't, it doesn't save the knob positions, but I found that it wasn't to be that bad of a downside. So I built this little bass lead tone here, and I can just go through with you. You know, again, I'm not going to go super in depth like a tutorial because there are many great videos on it. I'll just show you guys what I've done here. And essentially, I just, you know, build a bass lead tone here. And I mean, it's about as simple as it gets. And you can see the way it is, right? It's like Etch-a-Sketch style. See how it moves around. And it's very simple. The oscillator 1, I'm sending it to the filter, the square wave, and the sine wave. And then I'm also sending the oscillator 2 to the filter as well. So I'm like, I could essentially send any one of these things to the filter, and at least in this case, this is the patch. So I'm sending it to the filter, right? And then that filter right here, and then that filter is now going through the envelope signal, which is this called a trapezoid. So much like a EURAC module patching, I'm taking the oscillators to the filter, to the envelope generator, to the effects unit, and then, you know, to the output. Pretty simple, but you don't have to deal with cables, and you can save this as a patch. And that's what I've done here. So it's super simple. It was a little weird getting used to it, but the more practice I got, the more I understood, okay, that's fine. Now, the challenge is going to be like, okay, how do I start to break this thing? Same thing here, I built this other patch. Now this patch has the third oscillator is going to the ring modulator here. And they all have these levels so you can sort of like mix to taste. So, you know, SYNTRX II can just be a straight up fantastic mono synth with ton of character for great bass lines or lead sources, because this just sounds great. You know, ERICA synths have never disappointed with their sound quality. It's always been musical, it's always been sweet, but it can also like sound super weird and experimental too, right? So first thing I gotta say, and this is kind of ironic since this is what makes the SYNTRX so unique and so cool and has a special place in my synth collection. And don't get me wrong, I love the matrix style patching. That's what makes this instrument so interesting. It's definitely faster and cleaner than physical patching. And while I understand sort of the practicality of this Etch-a-Sketch style design knob, like I don't know how else you would do it, but it gets a little annoying, a bit grating to use after a while. Maybe first because like these sharp pointy knobs, I mean, it's really sharp and it does wear on your fingers after a while. Maybe I can upgrade these knobs or something like the way I upgraded some of the Moog, you know, those little tiny little knobs that they have. Maybe that's the thing, but it's not very pleasant to kind of hold these two knobs because they're a bit grating. Maybe, you know, the knobs could have been a little more luxurious, or maybe larger, or even the clickiness, which again, I understand that it's like, hey, you're clicking and you're, you know, in the matrix and understand that, but there's something about it that feels a little, I don't know, little grating after a while. It's not a pleasant experience after you've been at this for, you know, an hour or so. So again, it's a minor gripe, but I wanted to point that out. Another weird thing that SYNTRX II is doing is using this matrix screen as like a giant LED screen. I mean, I've seen other synthesizers do that, but at this price point, I mean, Like I would have rather have like a small OLED screen. Maybe it breaks the aesthetic, I get it, but having an OLED screen would have been a lot more like, I don't know, a lot more useful than this because this is just like, it's really hard to read. You know, it's just, again, a minor gripe, but I just wanted to point out that I wasn't a big fan of this. Finally, I just wish it had a USB MIDI interface. I mean, let's just have it so that it can integrate easier with DAWs and external computers. I mean, MIDI is adequate, it's fine, but I think USB MIDI interface just would have been better. But besides these small gripes, there's no doubt that the SYNTRX II is an immense playground for the experimental synthesists out there who could really benefit from like this matrix patching point without the need for physical cables, but still like leverage the power of ERICA style patching. And that can certainly yield some pretty interesting creative results. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think about the SYNTRX, matrix patching and all that. The best part of making these videos, as I've mentioned before, is interacting with you guys, getting your thoughts, and bouncing those crazy ideas around, challenging and learning and all that. So thank you guys for watching again, and I will see you guys next time.